Exercise. Can I hit the post? All right. You know what that is?
Yeah, like you're gonna hit your cue, but like,
can I hit the post?
for
Watch.
what is it for though?
I'm a radio DJ.
Okay.
Ready?
No, I'm ready for this. Yeah, no, I know what he's doing. I got this. All right.
Ready, Mike? 2:18 in Central Texas, hot and muggy outside. Only one thing to do: jump in your car and take a wild ride. Talk about rides. We're taking one to HE double hockey sticks, AC/DC, and Highway to Hell.
There you go. That is. For some reason, I thought that there's a little bit of like, there's an ad lib before he goes into it.
Yeah.
And I thought you were going to talk over it, but no, you hit it. That was always my favorite part. You want to know what the coolest thing was? Well, I say coolest thing. It was kind of a letdown. By the time I got into radio, you just recorded them all ahead of time, and then you just, in the computer, you lined it up with your voice to where it was, so you could always hit post that way.
You guys suck. All right, I'm going to do one more. Dude, this is
I enjoy
awesome.
it. I enjoy old radio stuff.
You ready? Are we recording?
Yeah, we've never. Oh, the other Shure mic.
2:20 in the afternoon here in Central Texas. If you hit I-35, you're going to want to get off at the Valley Mills exit if you're headed north, because you're going to run into some serious traffic, especially if you're looking for a vacation.
Dude, okay. That was really good. I got to give kudos on that one.
Coming up on the Pete Souza Show, we get a little deeper than usually we intend. We talk about death, we talk about career, we talk about life, relationships, why I can't cry, and why Zach cries when he doesn't want to. Yeah. All that, and we've also got either an incredible sports writer or an incredible basketball analyst coming up at the tail end of the show. We're efforting both, but you got to stick around. You know, have you had a lot of death in your life?
I don't know like what constitute as like a lot, but like I feel like I've had to deal with. I mean, I lost my dad in my 20s. So, yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you know, I lost my dad in 2020, my brother last year, and now my uncle, who's like you would say like your favorite uncle. I have two uncles who are my favorite, Uncle Marty and Uncle Lou. Yeah, it's just crazy, isn't it? And I think for me, what I struggle with the most is like finding the gear emotionally. Like I can't really even cry.
Yeah.
Are you a crier, Zach?
I'm a very emotional person. Here's what's weird about it is it'll strike me at the weirdest times, and then when I should, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So like funerals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah. I can't like. It was funny. We got the news about my uncle. I got it. So I was at brunch with Christy, my girlfriend, and a couple of her friends, and I see the text, and I'm like, ah. Like, again, this guy is larger than life, a legend, dude. Like, just king of kings. And so I get the message that because he's had cancer for 4 years, that they're going to move him into, like, a comfortable state, which you know what that means. And so Christy and I drive home. She's actually had a couple, so she's kind of tipsy. So I'm driving. You know, if I'm driving, we're in trouble. So I'm driving because I didn't drink. And she's like, you know, moving around to music. It's all good. Like she's having fun. I'm engaged with her, but this is in the back of my mind. So we get home, and I forget what was happening, but like I had my head like kind of on her shoulder, and I started to like well up for a second thinking about my uncle. But then it went away. Like,
yeah.
I almost wanted to cry more, but I couldn't. And you know how girls are sometimes? Like, so we get inside the house, and I tell her about what the email I got or the text I got. And I was like, yeah, I almost got like emotional in the car, you know? And like, she missed her window. You almost got emotional? Like she felt like she had like missed a day of work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, do you want to talk about it? I'm like,
yeah.
no, I'm good. I don't want to talk about it right now. Oh, you sure you don't? And I was like, no. And then my brother and my mom call. So we're on a three-way call talking about how we were going to visit him. It was important to see him. and I start cracking jokes because that's what I do.
I do the same thing. It's easy. It's easier to deal with humor than it is with actual
100%. But then I get off the phone and I get feedback from Christy. Maybe you want to just be a little more serious. And which I received the feedback because she's smarter than me and she's more in tune. But at the same time, I was like, this is how I handle grief. Like this, I got it. This is me. So there was that. And so we went to see him and it was a beautiful thing. I mean, he's still, he's still on the planet. He is such a long shot guy. Mm-hmm. Like he came from nothing, built his own business. It's called Stanley Foods. Has been very successful in the food distribution business to the point where he's been able to help a lot of other people out. This is the kind of guy who will give people jobs out of prison, and if they steal, he'll be like, let's give them another chance. Like he's just salt of the earth. Loves sports, a coach, watches everything, loves music. It's a huge loss for not only our family, but for society. So he's on the clock now, and that just blows.
Yeah.
So the trip was kind of somber. But the one thing I have learned, and I haven't always been good at, is just just get your ass there, show up. Yeah. Like I was like, oh, I'm not going to take off from work, but I did, and it was definitely. Who likes going to work anyway?
Well, yeah.
But when you're in trouble when you'd rather go see a relative die than wake up and go to work.
Well, but like you said, it's one of those things of kind of feeling like you need to be there, you need to show up. Yeah. And that's something that I feel was more something that I got the older I got too, of where you notice how things like that matter more. Yeah. Even just like being there just to be there.
Yeah.
So I get that.
But I still can't cry. I was talking to the therapist I see. I don't like to say my therapist, that was my brother Kevin, God rest his soul. He was always, very alpha. In his band, my bass player, my violinist, Mike and I, my brother, were always like, "Would you really I have to say that?" No, she was asking me questions like, "Do you think that it's because of how were you received when you cried as a kid?" I was like, "Look, my parents got after me and." I certainly, there were consequences, sometimes more rigorous than I would have liked when I did something wrong, but I never, they never yelled at me. Yeah. So we discovered that it comes back to, the alcoholism for me. I started to drink a lot when I was 14, 15, so I just kind of turned that off. So I'm learning my emotions again, Zach.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, that's big. That's
quite really a journey, big. Right?
No, it is, for sure. Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about. So I got a message from John Morris today, and John Morris, he was like, "Hey, I heard you're leaving TV," which I love John Morris. I sent him an email.
Great guy.
He is the best.
Love him.
So he's why I'm sitting here with you today, because I have the flexibility through calling games that has enabled me to leave a job that I felt a sense of purpose doing the news every morning, but I no longer, I've been feeling like a bad teammate. I'm always late, which is not who I am, but the show starts at 4:30 in the morning. Yeah. So late is, 3:45. But anyways, JMO is a huge reason why I've been granted this latitude and we're here doing this, kicking some ass over at the Rogue Sports Media Network. But he was like, do you want to come and talk about, come on and talk about your career arc? And I was like, yeah, sure. First of all, I don't take myself. I'm like, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, and I think that's part of I think that's a little bit of a problem for me too. I don't take myself serious at all, to the point where it's kind of get your shit together, dude. Learn how to drive.
Yeah.
Things like that. But I'm looking forward to it. We're going to talk next Monday. And I was just thinking about the whole career journey. 9 years ago. In 2015, I knew I'd always wanted to do play-by-play. I was sober. I was working for the Hornets. I had done that play-by-play for the NBA D-League that we talked about. But Scott Lauer, he's like, hey, I got an idea for you. Scott's our NBA expert, was the Hornets play-by-play guy for more than a decade.
We had him on a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, And so Scott was an agent, because when the lockout hit, Scott got they put Scott on a shelf. So he wasn't getting paid by the Michael Jordan-owned Bobcats, and Scott was not having that. So we started up an agency where he represented people in the news business. And he sees me like muddling along, and Scott decides that I need a full-time job because like working at Hornets games, which was a really prestigious, cool thing, and it was totally getting my foot in the industry, but it certainly wasn't paying the bills. You know that, as somebody who's worked in sports and worked at radio stations and stuff.
Yeah, no, it's tough.
So Lauer tells me he's like there's an opening in Monroe, Louisiana. Nicole Cross, who was a client of his. They had this guy who was working with Nicole in Monroe, which is northeast Louisiana, and the guy just one day he wasn't there anymore. And to this day, I don't know why. I've heard rumors. The guy was there for like 40 years. So Scott's like, yeah, like, I can get you an interview. I have an in. So I go down to Monroe after the last Hornets game because I'm doing like a digital pregame show for the Hornets and I'm doing their radio sideline. To the tune of like $100 a game. It's just not, you're not paying the bills, no matter how many games there are. And I had grown to love morning television because I went on the morning shows in Charlotte to talk about the Hornets. They would have me on, like I was some kind of expert, which is why we're pretty loose with that term around here because I certainly wasn't. And I go to Monroe and you have to have an audition. And like, dude, I get there, I'm lights out. So they're like, okay, it's time to audition. Like I can barely read, dude. I'm dyslexic. I'm ADD, and like the teleprompter comes on, and I'm just like, I'm like terrified, dude. It's like a stare off between me and the prompter, and I don't do well at all. To the point where I kind of just start ad-libbing stuff because I'm like, I got to go down, like I'm gonna go down swinging. Yeah. But unbeknownst to me, it had already kind of been like a prearranged marriage. Like Nicole wanted me to work there. She swung a huge stick. Bob Walters, who is my boss now, who is like, he's in the Hall of Fame. Bob gave me the job. He was the news director there. So anyways, when J-Mo started talking about, oh, do you want to talk about your career arc? One thing I never talk about, like, dude, I worked in TV news for like a year and a half, like struggling to read on the air. Like it was rough. Like you would go to the Chick-fil-A and, now if I'm at the Chick-fil-A here in Central Texas, somebody might come up and say, hey, Pete, love you in the morning. Well, I was so bad back then that people would see me, talk about me, but would never say hello. They were like, that's the guy who's on in the morning and is terrible. He can't read. Now, for me, I was lucky because when I got sober, I bottomed out so hardcore. Part of my journey back up was working at KFC and stuff like that. So I was like, look, I figured out the register at KFC. I'm going to figure this shit out, which I eventually did. But like that was like that's something I never talk about. That was a big like thing. And I've talked to people here, kids here about dyslexia. Like I'm on the news every day and I read the news and I can do it now. Like, to perfection. I can do it so much that I can throw your name into stories that I haven't even read before live on the air.
I'm on top of things, though, so I get why I would be.
Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, like as we're starting up here, the NBA Finals. Like, what are your immediate impressions of the NBA Finals, like post-Finals?
That I think it was Boston series to begin with. It seemed like, obviously that game 4, the blowout, it was just, I guess, Luka finally having a moment after a terrible game 3, but, coming out last night, but they led the entire game, right? Like it was Boston's from the get-go. And it still felt like that even after game 4 to me. So I think, at least for me, this is kind of at least a solidification of the unit that they've had there for a while. They always talked about, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, if they could finally just get it together, well, they did now. And so, I think that they're at least set up to where they could be then a problem next year and the year after that and to come for some
way. I believe that too. I'm pumped for Missoula. We've talked about it. Like, I love when guys like that, like it just shows how quickly things turn. I mean, literally this time last year, I can remember I was listening to like Sirius Radio, and I was in the shower and the Celtics had announced they were going to retain Joe Mazzulla. And I remember thinking like, damn, that's a surprise. Good for him. Like that's a guy, everybody's calling him second row Joe, because he was in the back row before all that stuff happened. And if you remember, like the Udoka stuff was crazy.
It was.
I mean, it happened so fast, and it was a huge black eye. I mean, I want to say that was before. Yeah, it was right before his second season, right?
Yes.
And so all that came out that he was like, there was infidelity. I think he was engaged to Nia Long, who why would you ever want to cheat on her? But who knows,
Terrible situation, but it did get him to Houston. So.
Yeah. Oh, sure, you're a Rockets fan, so you like that.
As a coach.
Yeah. No, maybe he's turned it around.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, that organization was decimated. Their hand was forced, and they stuck in house. And Joe Maz was their guy, and literally he still is, and he just won a championship. I love those stories in sports where, there's a guy who barely gets the job. Okay, now he's definitely gonna get fired because nobody respects him. To now, and there's one thing too, you can say about this. I've seen this with the Eagles when they won the championship, when they beat the Patriots in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see this with teams every so often. I saw it with the Oklahoma softball team. And this is take what you want of this and leave the rest. But the fact is, these people are driven. The people I'm talking about, I'm talking about Nick Foles and I think even who was it? Doug Peterson,
mm-hmm.
their head coach. These are faith-driven people,
mm-hmm.
and there's a power greater than them that moves them and that helps them block out all the other noise. And Joe Maz was a great example of that. That guy never took his eye off the ball. You
mm-hmm.
never would have known his job was on the line last year. He just shows up and does his job. You didn't see the stress on him. And it's so amazing and impressive when these guys make it through the other side, because sports, there's so much friggin' noise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when's the last time you watched First Take? For real.
It's been ages.
Now, let me ask you, how often do you see First Take clips come across your
lot.
phone? All the time. All the time. And what do you think when you watch that?
A lot of times it's like you said, it's noise, and I just kind of get tired of it after, because a lot of it seems repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is just the same arguments in some way, and it's just one guy trying to yell over another, and it's not necessarily just again, it's just a lot of noise for the sake of being noise.
I have to be in a really good mood to watch First Take. I got to be wearing life like a loose shirt, because if not, I'm just not ready because the cynic in me shows up. And the cynic is actually probably the smartest part of me,
mm-hmm.
because ignorance is bliss, it's all happiness, everything's good. But then I'm these guys, what they're talking about is complete rubbish. None of this matters. None of it matters. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing that everybody is running to watch it. I mean, the ratings are still pretty good. I guess Skip Bayless and his ratings are tanking. I'm reading that. And I understand ESPN, because the moment is such that, hey, man, women's basketball is at its all-time pinnacle. Let's talk about it. But some of the stuff I think that is talked about, and some of the mountains that are made out of molehills, it just kind of blows.
But it's going to get the views, and that's why they do it.
Yeah, it does. And there's a place for that. I never want to begrudge anybody their success. Yeah. Especially somebody I know King had Andrea Carter. Mm-hmm. She's a superstar.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact of the matter is that there's another outlet for her on TV that's whether she's doing a quick hit on SportsCenter to talk about women's hoops. Now she can be on Get Up. Now she's on First Take. She's on TV all day long. Mm-hmm. And in a previous life, she would have just been on television for the pre and half and post of ESPN women's basketball. I mean, then now that's a positive.
Sure. No,
you
for
can
sure.
use more talent like that, in your life. Some of the stuff and Mike Greenberg's the legend, but we talked with Cam about that. When the Celtics won the East and they won the Eastern Conference Championship, it's wait, are Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum getting along? Do you remember that? And they showed the picture.
Yeah.
And it was these guys, what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And I even think Greenberg wasn't necessarily all in on that take, but it was part of the rundown, And I'm sure, dude, if ESPN tapped me on the shoulder and they said, hey, we want you to come and host First Take, I'd be like, oh, I'm there,
Yeah. And then they probably tell you, here's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and I would try to be, and I do say like Molly Kieram does a great job. Like she does like keep them in order. Like I don't know that I would be any good as like a pundit on there, because I do believe like my authentic self, I just can't get that hyperbolic, because I just know at the end of the day, like being involved with organizations and stuff, not that I have any more know than for crying out loud, a guy like Stephen A. Smith, but like there's a lot of stuff that like people do focus, like a lot of the noise, like they can basically block it out. Players though, apparently, and I'm not in touch with the players now like I was before when I worked in basketball, but I think they do watch a lot of First Take.
Yeah, I think they do too.
Yeah.
Well, I think because and honestly, it can turn out to be perfect bulletin board material if you want it.
Yeah.
Like the way they do it. So like I kind of get it.
Yeah. Like your guy and my guy, like Jeff Pearlman. I'm just finishing up his book about Brett Favre. It's just, I can't tell you.
Is that Gunslinger?
Yeah. I can't tell you how amazing these books are. Like I have told this to Jeff Pearlman when I had the opportunity to talk to him on this show a year and a half ago, one of the older iterations of this show. But like I feel like he was put on earth for me, selfishly. Like who in the world is going to talk to like 500 people about a book like about the USFL? I love that. I mean, football for a buck. Like literally, like the guy who parked Donald Trump's car at the valet during that time he owned the New Jersey Generals, like Perlman's going to track him down and talk to him. And that's like pure like journalism, you know?
I think I heard him once tell the story on, it was either Dan, and it might have been Rich Eisen, where he and his son, when he was doing the USFL book, like they waited at a mall court to talk to one of the defensive tackles for the Dallas team, not wondering if he'd show or not, like met up with him, found his address later and was planning to go talk to him. He's like, so here I am, like with my son in this terrible, just shady neighborhood. But we're like, this is where he told us to meet him. Like he's just hunting down every lead to get the story.
He starts his Bo Jackson book off where he's...
Is that good? I still need to read that.
It's amazing. And by the way, I listened to these books. I read the one about the Mets, and then I actually listened to it too. But that's the one I read. But all the others I've listened to. He had a brick of Bo Jackson's childhood home that he was trying to get through security to get back to, I guess, Los Angeles from Alabama. And he had to explain to the person, like, hey, this is Bo Jackson's brick. And eventually they were like, all right, fine, dude. He's like, I'm an author doing this. But the story that you tell, sort of similar, is when he had to talk he was doing a book about the Lakers. The second book he did about them, with the Kobe and Shaq dynasty with Phil Jackson. And he goes to J.R. Ryder's house, knocks on the door. He has the USFL book with him. And somebody answers the door, and he's like, "Is JR here?" And people are like, "It's like the Sebastian Maniscalco comedy. Like somebody's actually coming to your house." And he said that JR Ryder came to his house. He's like, "Nah, man, nah, like no, you can't just like come to my house." But he got his attention enough where I think they talked on the phone later for like 2 hours. And the stories they pull out of these guys are just. They're absolutely amazing. Like one of the things in Brett Favre that I've discovered, and he has, all this stuff really, I find it relatable because Brett Favre is an alcoholic and a drug addict. I mean, he was taking pain pills to the point where, pain pills will get you constipated. And like, he couldn't, like, they had to take him to the hospital a night before a playoff game against the Lions because he like had a rock in his stomach. And it turns out like,
all the pain pills. Yeah.
It was a big, it was fecal matter, or what do you call it? Shit.
Yeah.
So then, but there's another thing too. When he was a senior, going into his senior year at Southern Miss, he's fishing with his boys all day, bottoms up, and he gets in like this terrible accident on the way home where he almost died, and he almost didn't play his senior year. Of course, he's Brett Favre. Like he finds a way to play and has like an amazing year. But like. Is there drinking and driving there? Like, probably. Like, if that happened today, goddamn Garmin Randolph gets turned around at a stop sign, and it's everywhere that he got a DUI, like a year and a half ago, which is like, I feel like that's a guy who just caught a bad break, made a mistake. But then you got this gunslinger who is a gunslinger who's like running all over town. And It's just amazing. Some of those stories about the way it used to be, which I think my childhood, I relate a lot back to like the way it used to be as like this warm and fuzzy time. But like, it was crazy.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing with, not to add on to it, but like reading Boys Will Be Boys was like, obviously, you know, I was a kid for a lot of that. And like, oh yeah, I remember all these players and all that. Oh, this is what was all going on there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Like it's kind of eye-opening, but yet also just like makes you realize like how things fall into a place a certain way to like lead to the story we got there.
Yeah. And we talked to our boy Mosley about the beginning of that book starts off with, I think it's Michael Irvin is stabbing Everett McKeever with a pair of scissors. Wow, because he's supposed to like they're waiting for haircuts in training camp, and like McKeever's like, I'm not moving.
Yeah, because I think he called him a rookie, even though he was
Something.
like a 5-year.
And maybe and forgive us, maybe it wasn't Everett McKeever, and maybe Everett McKeever was the guy who told the story to Perlman.
Yeah,
it was something like that. But like, Mosey was telling us, like, you know, you start talking to a guy, you're on the record, but you just you don't quite understand the power of it. You just get over your skis. And you tell a whole story like that, which is like, people are like, holy shit. And some of that material that's in those books is just absolutely fascinating. So that's a long way of saying, like, those are the sports writers that speak to me. You know, like growing up I watched the sports reporters. You know, growing up, like that was on Sunday mornings. I love it. I've talked about it on here. I talked about it recently to Bryce Cherry when he came in for the Hall of Fame, the Texas Sports Hall of Fame podcast. Like, in Philadelphia, they had a show called The Great Sports Debate. These were columnists and some beat reporters, but there was a lot. It just seemed so authentic and so real. Like the opinions they had were passionate, and they were driven on, for the most part, from what I could tell, experience-based stuff, where they're covering teams or covering guys in locker rooms. And now I just feel like it's kind of, you know,
not disingenuous, but maybe.
Well, you could say sometimes it is. Like, I've heard people say, Ryan Russillo has said, like, Skip Bayless was like a wrestler. Like, almost like, hey, this is what I'm going to do today. This is what I'm going to, my take. Now, Bayless denies this. And so do I believe it? But I'm going to show up and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And
that to me is, I don't know. Is it like, but then let me ask you this, because you're a wrestling fan and so am I. Like they're not the same, because people know wrestling's fake, right?
Well, it could be to the same in a point of where, like, yes, while you know that wrestling is, you know, scripted or predetermined, like their job is still to go out there and to make the character and to sell the character whatever way it is. It could be, I could argue the fact that whatever hot topic or, you know, post that ESPN is giving to Skip, he's like, hey, you're supposed to get this over today, in a similar way of like, hey, go out there and, you know, make people hate
That's
you.
A wrestling
it
term.
is, but at the same time, I think it fits. Like, hey, we think that, you know, we would get a lot more impressions and stuff like that if, again, I'm not saying this is what happens.
No, we're just totally speculating.
If we go ahead and you bash LeBron, even though he's been playing well, okay, well, that's the company line. I'll go out there and do that. Like, you can, like, there's ways you could look at that.
Mike and Tony don't do that, though. No. On PTI, like, they're the gold standard.
Old school.
Yeah, that's who
sports
I love.
Writers. Yeah.
They are the gold standard. What was your favorite sports debate show growing up?
PTI. Honestly, like, even in junior high, I would come home. I would watch. It would 2 back-to-back. I would watch Around the Horn with all the actual sports writers. Yeah. And then I would watch PTI.
Yeah, Around the Horn still does have, like, they're still, like, all those people, or most of them, are coming to you from a newsroom somewhere. Yep. You know, they're
I kind of liked seeing that too, like the actual, like the newsroom where they were working, and Woody Page with his little, you know, blackboard behind him.
And you know, we've talked to Kate Fagan about this. She was a writer for the Inquirer when I was working for the Sixers. She was a Sixers beat writer, and then she had this meteoric rise, and she was on ESPN and writing for ESPN.com and writing for the magazine and ESPNW. The magazine might even been gone by the time she was there, but she was on PTI, or not PTI, on Around the Horn a lot. And, like, she has been transparent with, like, that was, like, a ridiculous stress that, like, she didn't need in her life. Like, every day thinking about how am I going to, like, present this thing that maybe I don't totally believe in on a show where there are millions of people watching. Again, you're not you're not like a serial killer or a drug dealer, but like there is something when you put your head down at night that's not totally pure. That's why I honestly that's why every morning I get up. Going back to what we said about John Morris and him wanting to talk about how my career's changed, every morning I get up at 3 a.m., 3:30 to go in and to read the news, right? The news is bad, dude. The news for the most part is bad. And I think the opportunity that I have, like working with Keisha, who I love, and I used to work with Taina and Sean now, and I used to work with Brady. Those are the weather guys here. Like, I love them. Like, I have a connection with them. And, like Allie, who we know here, is another one, and my buddy Christy Soto. Like you develop these incredible relationships with people and strong bonds. But as far as like delivering the news, like I have to say, like COVID was probably my most invigorating time in my TV news career because I felt like we mattered. Like people were actually watching to figure out where you could get tested, where you could go. People are on hard times, like food banks. Here, you can go there. Politicians. I was doing the noon show every day at this point, and Governor Abbott would come on once a month and talk to me because like him, don't like him, whatever. He was accessible to Texans. Like he knew he had to make himself accessible, and he was cool. He would go on all kinds of local stations, and that was super exciting. And now I don't know that the news or the medium is the problem. It's just me. I'm just like, I don't want to. I'm sick of telling people about murders.
Yeah, well, it's like, that can't be fun after a while.
No,
it's being the guy who brings bad news all the time.
Yeah, and local news has totally changed, and it's unfortunate. It's very real. The support is not there for reporters. Especially like what they call an MMJ. They run out there. They do everything themselves. Not certainly in the best environment sometimes. You could say if you want to do it bad enough, that's the price you pay. Okay, I get that, but it doesn't take away from the fact that, KWTX, back, 30, 40 years ago, everybody that would go out with a microphone had a camera person with them, and that camera person would help them navigate the story, get better shots for the viewers at home. It would allow the reporter to write their story on the way to the murder scene rather than thinking about it. Then you get to the murder scene. Okay, now my car's parked. Now I got to. There's so much different stuff, that's changed, and it's these gigantic entities now that own these local news stations, and it's really a bottom line deal. And I can tell you the KWTX where I work here. Is one of the last stations to have there is a personal feel to it. I know a lot of places where there's just not anymore. Yeah, right. I mean, look at do you watch the local news at all anymore?
No. I don't. Granted, though, I don't watch news at all in general. A lot of for the reason you just brought up.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Not to say that I'm uninformed. I'll just go. I find it easier to read than to watch. I don't know. Emotionally, it's easier for me to process. But yeah, sometimes there's just a lot of doom and gloom, and it can be a lot after a while.
How you doing with the cell phone?
Are
you like screen time?
I could do a lot better there.
So could I.
I know.
It's a real shame.
It's easy to get lost and stuff, but I think that's what it is. We're just finding things that we want to.
We got it. You want to talk about a waste of energy? I mean, and my timeline is actually pretty positive, but it's still a waste of time. I mean, it's at some point. I don't know. I mean, and that's something, by the way, I think I need to really start to address. Like the phone stuff is dude, it's like an appendage. I'm where is, I love that you and I are talking now, and we'll wrap this up, I guess, in a little bit, but I'm not going, I'm not thinking on my phone the whole time.
Yeah, no, I've had mine on the charger there the whole time we've talked, which is nice. It's kind of freeing in a way.
It is freeing, right? Yeah, I try not to take it in. If I go to AA meetings, I'll always leave it in the car. The therapist I go to see, I'll leave it in the car. When I'm on dates, I try, with Christy, I try to just keep it away. If you've ever gone on a date with somebody who's checking their phone all the time, even if they like you, It's the most annoying thing in the world.
Yeah, no, my wife will bring it up sometimes. I don't realize I'm doing it.
You do that. What are you looking at?
I don't know. I just get distracted easily. I see something shiny and I just fall
What
down
are you
a
looking
rabbit
at?
hole.
Seriously.
Honestly,
you're talking to your wife,
Here's
who we
the
can
thing.
say is expecting now. The two of you are expecting. So
Wow,
the
you
connection
are setting
should
me
be
up. This sounds so awful.
the connection should be stronger than ever. And I'm just curious.
I'm not saying this is recent. No, I'm not saying this is recent.
I'm not
just saying
judging
I've
you,
done
by the
it
way.
before.
By the way, I'm not judging you. Now I'm just want to get in your brain. What takes you out of that conversation?
So like sometimes like we'll just be
Like
out.
an Astros score?
No.
Bleep that out, by the way. I don't want to swear on here.
No.
You mark that?
By the way, I will. Yeah, I marked it. I will.
Like an Astros
celebrate.
score?
I will celebrate an Astros loss. But no, what will happen is we'll be talking like at the, like we'll be out somewhere to eat and we'll be talking and then there'll just be a lull. Like there won't be anything. She'll, drink. And so
you'll
after
go
a
to your
bit,
phone.
I'm just like, okay. And so I'll just grab it to think like, oh, let me just check that. And then it turns into, oh, what's this? And then after about 30 seconds, I get like a, and I'm like, oh, yep. And I just turn it off and set it back down. I don't mean to.
You're probably pretty good then. If that's
I try
the
to be,
case.
yeah.
Yeah. Some people, I mean, it gets kind of scary. Like, and again, like I'm not judging. I don't know. I've never been married. I never found anyone foolish enough to make that decision with me. But I see couples sometimes, and they are both like here, here, here.
Yeah.
And whatever. It can't be great for business. That's all. I mean, as far as like the connectivity is concerned, I think that we're not alone in that. Me and you. I think 80% of America is in that boat. But I would like to get out of it.
Yeah. No. Or at least like work on getting better towards it.
Let's see. Speaking of phones. All right. Fran Frasil is supposed to join us. He's with USA Basketball today. We'll probably do him tomorrow. And we got John McClaine also from the Houston Chronicle a long time. We're going to throw him in there. Before we go to either of them, though, I do want you guys – we do a lot of great stuff for the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. And we have a podcast, Texas Sports Hall of Fame podcast. And it's become a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. I mean, I talked to Bryce Cherry about the selection process. He's a local writer here in Texas.
That's this episode, actually.
So that's coming out. I'm going to talk to John McClaine tomorrow. Everybody knows John McClaine. Mm-hmm. I mean, beat writer for the Houston Oilers forever, and then just columnist for the Houston Chronicle. He's a legend. But I also got to talk to Jackie Sherrill. And I really felt like I had a moment with Jackie Sherrill. Now, my football career – When I was in high school, I was like just missed being the kind of player. I wanted to be like Latimer from the program, The
program. I hadn't thought about
Which,
that
by the way,
forever.
that's a window into like how screwed up I was. This guy, was my hero. Brian Bosworth was my hero. I was not a very well-adjusted kid mentally, but I loved college football. I loved guys like the Boz.
Not Alvin Mack.
No, I didn't like Alvin Mack. He was unrelatable. He was too good. Right? He was too good. But I just missed. Like, honestly, I started to, and this is a problem that I've addressed later in life. I got one letter going into my junior year from Temple University, and you would have thought that I was the most sought-out recruit in the history of Pennsylvania high school football. And I continued to improve, and I got, Division I, like, visits and, like offers, but like I wanted to go to like Miami. Mm-hmm. I wanted to go to Mississippi State and play for Jackie Sherrill. I wanted to go to South Carolina. And that shit didn't happen. I remember a guy from Pitt came to see me play. And I had a bad game. And my coach was like, "What happened to you?" I was like, I don't know. He was like, "Well, it turns out I used to take Ritalin sometimes before I played, and I would play incredible." Mm-hmm. Me and your boy Buff the Stuff talked about that, Buff Bagwell, which you can hear on another podcast, the Payoff Podcast. But it's ultimately a mind F. You take these performance enhancers like speed and stuff, and you think they make you so much better. They do initially, but then if you don't have them and the pick coach is there to see you, and you play like, flat, that's not, they're not doing you any favors. Yeah. So, and now you're looking at your phone.
Well, Zach. I got a text because now I'm just
What's
making
the
sure.
text?
It's from Mike, and I thought it was okay. I was making sure it wasn't related to anything we were doing in here, and it's not. That's why that was a text to make sure we were good.
What does he need to do?
I don't know. It was something that's on me. Don't blame
Mike.
Don't blame Mike. It's not on Mike.
So, anyways, with Jackie Sherrill, I told him, I mentioned the fact that I like just missed as a recruit. Hey, look, I got a scholarship, went to Richmond, hard problem, I couldn't play. but they kept me on scholarship, like Jim Reed. Like, I got to bless myself when I say that dude's name, even though he's still alive. He was a great dude, and still is. Incredible coach. He said, Peter, we heard we always knew you had a big heart. We just didn't know it was defective. And this is after we all found out about my heart problem. He said, don't worry about it. You're going to come to school. You're going to be on scholarship, and you're going to play. You're going to get better, and you're going to play. Well, I never got better, and I never was going to play. But Coach Reed was awesome, and he's been a coach all over America, NFL. But anyways, I expressed my yearning to have played in like a big-time SEC football program to Jackie Sherrill, and this is how that went. I would have loved to have talked to you when I was a player. I always had hoped you would have recruited me when I was at Archbishop Carroll in Philadelphia, but I wasn't good enough to go to Mississippi State, so I went to Richmond instead. But it's great to talk to you now.
Well, you understand. Every player understands, and the same thing with people that are successful in life. I've always. First question you want to ask before you hire somebody, have they paid their dues? And in football, have they paid their dues? To be the coach. And you look at their resume and see where they coached, and you can tell quickly if they paid their dues or not.
I can't talk to John McClaine and not ask you about your memories of Willie Mays.
Well, when I was a kid, and I think it was a 1960 All-Star game, I would have been 8, and I liked baseball because my dad watched it, but my grandparents watched it, and I spent a lot of time at their house in Waco and in Hillsborough and then Waco, my grandmother especially. So they played 2 All-Star games back then. The second one was the money went to the Union. And so I can't remember the inning or anything. I remember Willie Mays had a triple, and when he went flying around second base and his hat came off, and he went had a hook slide into third. The dirt flew up in the air in a cloud of smoke. And I was sold watching Willie Mays play, and then watching him make basket catches and running. And so Willie Mays was probably the reason that I fell in love with the game as much as I have. And then 2 years later, the Astros were born, and I was really sold. And but he was the first hero I have, and I've been a diehard baseball fan ever since. And I still think that he is the greatest all-around player in the game. Not necessarily the greatest hitter, but the greatest combination of hitting, power, base running, the speed, playing center field. I saw a thing today I retweeted was in an old-timers game for the Mets when he was 50 at Shea Stadium. He made a long running catch, and he caught it, basket catch over his shoulder, and he fell and rolled on the warning track, and people thought he was hurt, not going to get up. But that was so typical of Willie Mays. And I know when the Astros played the Giants, I hated it because he and Willie McCovey and Orlando Cepeda and those guys were just unbelievable. Larry Darker, who's a friend of mine and is one of the gridiron legends of Texas, I see him quite a bit because we do charity work down here. When Larry was 18 years old, he started against the Giants, and he struck out Willie Mays and Willie McCovey, and I believe Orlando Cepeda on his 18th birthday. That doesn't happen
Happy birthday.
anymore, and I've talked to him about that. And so probably when Willie when he played in the 50s and the 60s, there was never been I've never seen a more exciting player.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you could describe the feelings you got, because I'm a historian. I like to consider myself, right. I dig into all the watching the videos and reading long before he passed, but I don't have that same feeling that you have of sitting in front of the television or sitting in the stands watching him play. Can you describe what it was like, how you felt?
Well, first of all, because he's playing in New York, and then when he was a stay-hey kid, he got a lot of publicity because he played in New York. A guy I went to Brooklyn to interview one time, the late great Joel Bucksbaum, this NFL editor for Pro Football Weekly, who was an institution around the NFL, especially here because he did talk show on my station for a couple of decades. So I went to interview him in New York. Nobody else, he never let anybody else do it. And when his dad was a city attorney for New York, and when Joel was a kid, his dad would take him during the day. He'd take him to Polo Grounds, and he'd see Willie Mays. Brooklyn, go to Ebbets Field, and he'd see Duke Snider. And he'd come to the Bronx, and he would see Mickey Mantle.
Wow.
3 Hall of Fame center fielders he got to watch. And, everybody loved Mickey Mantle. When I was playing Little League in Waco, and Pee Wee and all that, everybody wanted to wear number 7 for Mickey Mantle. But I remember at the time, because Mantle got hurt so much, even early in his career, and Mays was still a more exciting player. And so when you see him on TV, it's one thing, an old black and white TV. And then my aunt and uncle were the first person I knew that had a color TV. And to see him play in color, that was even better. But the best of all was we used to go from Waco to Houston once a summer and go to old Colt 45 Stadium. That would have been in 62, 63, and 64 before the Astrodome was built. And they played in that stadium, and it was awful. But, boy, to get to see those guys in person, to go early and see them in batting practice and hitting home runs. And that stadium that they had, which was on the premises where the Dome and NRG Stadium has a parking lot now, to see him in person and hitting balls out of the ballpark was just mesmerizing. And watching Willie Mays, it's one thing to see a power guy like Willie McCovey, but boy, to see Willie Mays in person, and I always thought he was larger than life. He wasn't. I don't think he's even 6 foot tall, and he weighed like 185. And you'd think a guy that hit the ball that far and that hard would be bigger, but it was all about he had an incredible swing, big forearms, muscles everywhere, and his bat was just so quick. And I remember the one game he hit 4 home runs, and it was on TV. Only time he'd ever done that. And I read a story about it where Willie Mays had gotten sick from eating wherever he ate the night before, and he didn't think he could play.
Was this at home or on the road?
I think it was a Candlestick, and so Joey Amalfitano, who I think was their second baseman or shortstop, asked him. He said, "Well, on a scale of 1 to 100, what are you going to think you're going to be if you play?" And he said, "Oh, I guess about a 70." He said, "Well, you as a 70 is better than anybody else as 100, so you need to get your ass up at the ballpark." And because he was weak, he asked Amalfitano if he could use his bat as lighter. And Amalfitano said, okay, and he had 4 home runs in his first 5 times to the plate.
See, those are the stories.
And I believe Felipe Alou hit 2 or 3, and nobody paid any attention because Willie Mays hit 4.
Those are stories only somebody like that's why I love talking to somebody like you who's seen, if not all of it, a lot of it. And I want to ask you one more question just about your background and your history, and then we'll get into the ballots. The most interesting Houston team that you have ever covered as a columnist or beat writer or in your radio career,
Well, I've only covered the NFL for the last 48 years, but I've been a huge baseball fan. Like, I like the NBA, but mainly in the playoffs. I like the NHL. My first job here was covering the original Houston Aeros with Gordie Howe and his sons, Mark and Marty.
Yeah.
I left the Tribune Herald in October of '76 and came down here to cover hockey. Never seen a game. Only been on a plane once from Waco to Odessa for an MCC, a junior college journalism convention. So I got here for a week, and then I'm traveling all over Canada and the U.S. watching games. I had no clue what was happening, but I learned it, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. And I cherish those memories. And it's like Edmonton Oilers now. I'm a Edmonton fan because I went to Edmonton a bunch, and I liked it, and I liked the people. And to me, the greatest dynasty I've ever seen was Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Glenn Sather coached
Grant Fuhr. They were
Oilers.
so good. You know, I'm from Philadelphia, and they beat my Flyers in '87. And
yeah, well, you had your day with the Broad Street Bulls.
and then they swept them in '85. But it was Heartbreak Hotel. Every time you ran up against the Oilers, you know, in the back of your mind, it was one of those teams where it's like, you know you don't have a chance.
I saw Wayne Gretzky when he played for the Indianapolis Racers when he was 17. WHA would sign 17-year-olds, and the NHL didn't allow it. That's why a bunch of players went there. But anyway, the Oilers would have won 5 cups in a row if Steve Smith, the defenseman, had to put the puck in his own net.
Yes.
Which cost him one in the middle. And so I thought that was the greatest dynasty. So I've got a soft spot for them. So I love hockey, and in the playoffs and the NBA, I don't love it, but I watch it in the playoffs. And if the Rockets are good, which has been a while, I watch it. But to me, nothing since I've covered baseball. And, I mean, the NFL, the most interesting team I've ever seen was the what we call the Love You Blue Oilers of Warren Moon, Bruce Matthews, and Mike Munchak, because they went to the playoffs, league best 7 consecutive years, and they choked the Buffalo game 35-3 in the third quarter in the January of 1993 for the 92 season, which was the biggest choke of all time until Minnesota broke it. And so that team in that era, because they had so much talent, it was about the offense, and they were exciting, and they were fun, and they were controversial, and they had Buddy Ryan for a year, and it was 93.
Yeah.
And it was just you couldn't beat it when you're covering a team that wins and has controversy. And every day, it's like Forrest Gump, it's like a box of chocolates. You never knew what you were going to get.
I mean, Buddy Ryan's punching Kevin Gilbride on the sideline, and there's Terry Hope breaking it up. I mean, I was a kid in high school watching that, and you really couldn't believe what you were seeing. And that team was so prolific, and they were so talented.
And 3 Hall of Famers, good team. Gentleman Jack Pardee, one of the all-time nice guys. So I would have to say that Love You Blue Oilers, specifically 92 and 93, and the other one was Love You Blue Oilers, but they were one-dimensional with Earl Campbell, but they have Earl and Kenny Stabler and Hall of Famers, Robert Brazil, Curly Culp and Elvin Bethea, and they were an exciting team, and they were never the same when Dan Pastorini was traded for Stabler, because if Earl was the heart, Dan was the soul, and they just weren't the same. But so I would say the Love You Blue Oilers, the Run and Shoot Oilers were the most exciting, interesting team I've ever covered that was in Houston.
All right, John, man, I thank you so much. I'm going to track you down here next time you're in town at one of these events at the Hall of Fame. I really appreciate it.
Well, if you're gonna be there for the Joe Green lunch, and I'm the one that's going to be interviewing him, and I'll be there.
All right, you got it. I'll see you there.
Thanks very much.
All right, thanks, John. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching the Pete Souza Show. We got a little momentum here, so if you're watching, make sure you subscribe, or I don't know how you do that, or like. And we got a bunch of great shorts that we put up thanks to Zach Burke every week, right, Zach? I like to give him a hard time when like my receding hairline isn't fixed.
It looks good.
If you're watching now, you've watched way too long. So we thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
We are Rogue Media Sports.